Today I want to talk about how to structure your React application. I've been working on React applications for quite a few years. I think I started maybe like 6-7 years ago, and I started several applications for personal projects, but I also worked on like larger applications, some that even made it to like the enterprise level, so to speak. So I wanted to kind of show you the pattern that I want to follow. So first, let me go ahead and let me go ahead and create a React application. That sounds good to me. And while this is installing, let me, I guess, just discuss some of this with you. Or maybe it's going to be too fast. It might be too fast. React applications don't have a specific structure they have to follow. In fact, for many years, you would see people asking Dan Abramov on Twitter, hey, how should I structure my React application? And he'd respond with, it depends. And there's no like one specific way of doing it. And I agree with him, but I also know that a lot of applications do follow very similar structures, and a lot of applications can be structured in a very, I want to say, developer-friendly way. And I want to say developer-friendly because that's one of the bigger deals here. You really want your team to be able to go into the application and have the ability to know where things should be, know where things go, and where to find code, right, and possibly new data. So let's look at the structure here. This is kind of the most basic thing that we have. Usually there is like an index.js file that mounts the actual application, and there's like a top-level global application wrapper. In most applications that I've seen, this wrapper is usually where the router starts at some point. Well, you have like all of your contexts, all of your, if you're using Redux, this is where you would bootstrap Redux, and so on. And one of the more important things is also that you have a router here. And if you use something like the React router, I think that's what it's called, you'll be using something like a switch, and then you'll be able to route things around where they need to be. And there are different ways of using a router. I've seen some people have a router component that just drop into the app. But I don't want to get too deep into this part. I want to talk about like the really important stuff here. So let's start easy. One of the first folders that you might want to create in your source folder is a constants folder. This is kind of a trick that I learned somewhat recently. I've never really organized all of my constants in one place. But let's say you have certain, I want to say, global configurations that could be utilized as constants. So I worked on some software that had to do with decimal math, and some of our configurations would be like, show numbers with this much of precision, show a different type of number with more precision, right, and things like that. In other places, I've seen date constants, so let's go ahead and do that. So let's say that we're writing our application, and we're writing a note-taking application, because I think that's kind of the standard for creating your first React app, and hopefully we're all familiar with writing a note-taking application or a to-do application. And we want to display the date that a note was created or updated. And when we do that, we have like a unified date system that we want to use, that we want to format our dates as. So this is where kind of those constants would be. So we would like export something like export constant human readable date. And maybe this is not the best example, but what was it? DD. Hopefully this is correct. But when you're in a different part of the application and you're using moment or day.js or even like the international format or anything that you're using, you then have the ability to import that constant, right? So you can do human readable date from, and hopefully you have aliasing and stuff working correctly, so you should be just able to do constants date, and it'll know that it's where it needs to be. That's another thing. If you can set it up, the base URL, whatever tool you're using, make sure that you're able to just start at the root of your source folder in order to import stuff, because it sucks having to do ... and so on. But let's say we have this, and we want to display today's date using moment, so we would have something like moment new date, and then when we want to display it, we would do I don't know, just, I'm not here to display code, but and you just do something like m.format human readable date, and then you're able to kind of have a comprehensive structure of like the dates and how they show up. You know, I'm writing out this mmdd. Maybe this is not correct. Maybe the m's need to be lowercase because I don't know the difference between them. I think lowercase m's will show you if you do 3 of those, you'll get like an abbreviation for the month using 3 letters. So, you know, maybe there's a bug like that. And it's just, it kind of makes things really constant across your application. So that's the first folder out to create. Again, you could put so many different things in here, even like URLs, endpoints, routes, anything you want, it could go into constants. So let's go ahead and create the next one. And this is kind of like for shared or globally used hooks. So let's say you have a hook that will show you user data. So we'll have use user.js. You know, we'll import whatever authentication stuff we want to. Then we want to export it. So we'll export use user. You know, and it will return whatever data needs to be there. Maybe it's context based, so you'll have, you know, use context, user context. And this is great because whatever you're working on, if there's something that you're going to be using constantly across the entire application, maybe you have a wrapper for the routing hooks or the what do you call it, the history hook or anything like that, that would go into this hooks folder so that you're able to, again, import it really easily. You know, let's say we want to import this user stuff here, so I can do import use user from, and we can do hooks use user. Look how clean this all looks so far. And then maybe all we just need is their name, so we'll do use user, and we'll do hi name, and today is great. So we're already kind of structuring our application a little bit, but we're structuring it from our global point of view so far. And we're going to continue doing that until I get to the next point. And I think that's going to be kind of the shift in how I write my own applications. So let's say we have a components folder here as well. Again, these would be global components that you might use anywhere. Maybe you do have a user component, maybe you have a date component, maybe you have anything like that, anything that you could use across the entire application, whether it's a UI component or not. If you're at a point where you're like, well, I have a lot of these utility components, but I also have these UI components that I keep importing, this is when I would say, you know what, we'll get to this. So let's go ahead and create the next thing. One thing I want to note real quick is that I want to always make sure to name things for what they really are. So these are date constants. You should be able to read it like a sentence. This is a use user hook, right? I'm exporting use user from the use user hook. And so here I'm going to go ahead and create, oh, I already forgot what I was doing. So let's say we have a, what did I want to do? I discussed the user component. Yeah, so I don't want to go too far into UI components themselves. So we're gonna go ahead and have a loader. Oh, that sounds pretty UI-ish, but that's fine. We'll go ahead and start with that. Now, here's where things get a little bit complicated. So first of all, I'm naming the folder the same as the component that's going to be in that folder. Then I'm creating another file, which is the actual loader, and I'm creating also an index file. The index file will export the API of that component. So in our case, maybe the only thing we want to export is loader, which would be this, right? But maybe we also have a utility here. Maybe we have a hook that hooks directly into this loader component. So we don't want to separate those two. Again, like you want to keep things as together as possible in, well, I say again, I haven't mentioned it, but you want to keep things together as close to as possible to the things where they're being actually used. So maybe we have a use loader component or a hook that's in this component. So we're kind of like mixing things a little bit here. But we're able to export this interface to the component. What happens when you do that is that you can do this. You can do use loader. I can import these two things. I can do components and loader. Again, clean import, really easy to understand. We'll do is loading from equals use loader. I don't really know what kind of logic this would have, but I find myself having components and hooks that work specifically with those components that allow you to kind of like change how that component works. So maybe here we'll have like a yeah, maybe we'll just do this and we'll have an export that's variance. So we know, let's make these constants, variance, so that we can use different kinds of loaders. So if is loading, and I don't know how I can tell, maybe it hooks into other stuff, display loader, and we can do like a type, and we can just use this these constants that are inside of the loader here. And again, I'm going to show how this might work. Variance dot small, I don't know. So we have a clean import. We have all this different stuff that we might need. We have constants, and I also got into the habit of creating kind of like anytime I create a component or anything else, it's like a miniaturized application. So our loader has its own hooks, it has its own constants, it has everything else. And so here I can export variance, and variance just will be an object. I don't know. Small is small. Using constants this way, when you have TypeScript, when you have VS Code, it'll make it really easy, because when you just do variance dot, you'll see all the options that you have available, rather than having to hunt down, how that works. So let's go ahead and go to our use loader, and we can export our loader here. Loader, right? We have our hook, and we exported is loading, so return is loading, I don't know, true, and then we want to also package in the variance for whatever reason. Again, clean imports, clean exports, clean APIs that we're dealing with here. You could also just export those constants directly so that you do something like this. I don't really like how that looks. You could also like try to import variance directly this way. You could do that as well. So, there are all kinds of different ways of structuring your application, but the main thing is you keep kind of redoing this. What do we have here in terms of the main application structure? We keep redoing that inside of the components. We have our constants, we have our hooks, we have our component. Hooks themselves can have their own constants, they can have their own folders. So if use user is a little bit too complicated, we follow the same pattern here. We'll just go ahead and move this. And we'll export it. And guess what? Guess what just happened because of this index.js hack? I don't have to change my import. Even though I switched from exporting the file itself, I moved it into a folder. Because of the index.js thing, I don't have to change my imports. It's just, if my hook grows larger, I don't have to deal with, where am I going to break imports? What kind of a regex search do I have to do across my applications to figure out when I need to change things? So this is like a good example of why I follow these conventions. So we have a few things here. I wanted to mention the UI pattern as well. So if you have a UI library, or like if you're starting to build out, let's say, your own custom buttons, right? We're going to follow the same structure. And what goes into UI versus component, all up to you. You have to kind of figure out the boundary. And I think it's a constant negotiation of what makes sense and what doesn't. But we follow that same pattern of having an index.js that exports the component. And now we have it inside of the UI folder, and it just kind of makes sense doing it this way. Now, here is one thing that I want to mention about this, and it's that once your UI library gets large enough or you have multiple applications, you're already going to be set up in a folder structure that you can copy paste into a UI library that you want to share between all of your applications if you have multiple applications, or if you just want to develop it separately from your main application. If you want to have a UI library that has its own testing and storybook setup and whatever else, you'll be set up to do that. Before I get to the next part, which is the biggest thing that I kind of want to mention here, there is a pattern that I also follow in my personal applications, and it's having the root level index.js. So whenever you have a components folder, you would have an index.js, and all that would do is export loader from this way, right? So that's not supported right now. Whatever, that's fine. The idea would be that, and we can kind of like, depending on your compiler, it will work or it won't work. But when you do that, what that allows you to do is do something like loader importing the loader as a whole, as the whole component. So instead of doing this here, we could do something like loader from components. And so we kind of suddenly have a components library, again, that we can lift up and put into a custom solution or like a custom library. And instead of doing things this way, we would just do loader.useLoader. Then we would do, loader.loader. Even if that may not sound like it makes sense, this is one way of how we could achieve this, like modularity and things like that, where you don't have to do imports that go too far, where you can have these interfaces that kind of encompass only the pieces that you want to use in one place. So 2 different ways of doing things. I'm always on the fence about this one, so I'll leave this one to you. So let's say we start working on the application and we're like, hey, it's not a single screen. It's not a single page that I can put in the app.js, which most of the time it isn't. You got to have a login screen. You got to have a logout screen, a reset password screen. You got to have the main dashboard of whatever you're building. If we're making a note-taking app, we're going to have, displaying a note, displaying a list of notes, maybe a search functionality. All these different aspects of the application, which is where this final most important folder comes in. And it's a folder that changes names depending on what you're working on. And one job where I've worked, we call them apps. Yeah, we did. I worked at an Elixir shop that used an umbrella application, and we took that paradigm from Elixir and how you interact with umbrella applications in Elixir and used it in React. In another place, I've heard it called modules, and another place screens. What it really means is that one section of the application, and what could that look like? In my example, I want to call it, in one application we called it realms, because we were just it was a fun little application. But let's say we do this. So we'll go ahead and call it modules. And we can just go ahead and do an index.js. That's okay. It's having a root level index.js is in a folder is always a good practice. Like I said, it allows you to do this export star as loader. Just agree on a convention as a team. And let's go ahead and do authentication. So I sometimes name this uppercase, sometimes lowercase, but mostly uppercase. And here's what we're going to do. Another index.js. This is the interface into our module. So think about modules almost as like node modules, where you have a single entry point and you're trying to expose the public API of your module to the rest of the application. But in our case, that public API will include routing. It will include so much more. So first we're going to export routes. So we'll do this. We're going to create a routes file. A routes file will kind of bring everything together for us. We're going to, let's say, import, let's just export it. We'll do export constant routes. We're going to return this. We're going to do a switch, just like you would with React Router. And here we can do the fun stuff like, oh, hey, like if the path is /user or /login, right, we're in authentication, we can go ahead and return the login page, you know, and we'll go ahead and import that later. What that allows you to do, so let's dig out of this real quick, is this. We can import authentication from modules.authentication, or better yet, authentication from modules. So we, you know, depending on how you want to do this, we can do export authentication from authentication, and we're going to create a default export here, export default, and that would be routes. So we'll just do that. Let's just say we'll do that. So we're going to go ahead and import our authentication stuff this way, and we'll know that if the path is path/auth, right, we can do this. And what's cool about that is, and I probably messed up some of my routing because this probably should say /auth/login, whatever. I mean, you would then use a hook and props and, you know, just all the regular stuff that you would do. But what this allows you to do is that anything that is /auth will be inside of this one module. So it encapsulates that module just perfectly. It has its own routing, it has its own logic, its own loading, but at the same time, it can use all of the global level, all of the global level stuff. Now let's go ahead and expand on this. How do you think this module would develop? Exactly how like our global stuff. So we would have components for components that are shared within our authentication folder. We'd have hooks probably. We would have constants if we need them. And we would have UI if that's necessary. And additionally, we'd probably have something like pages or screens or something to that effect. So we're going to go ahead and call it pages. And inside of pages, we're going to go ahead and create our login page. And again, index.js, login.js. And when we import into our routing, we would do login from pages. And here we can do export login from .login from ./login. Cool. So now we have a structure for all of our pages. Our login page might have forms on it. What if it's a form that you're reusing in different places? Because the login form and reset password form are very similar. You would put those shared components into this components folder over here. What if you have a hook that gets the current user data, right? Well, because everybody's using it, it's going to be actually at the global level. And this kind of folder structure allows you to upgrade or escalate or de-escalate components, hooks, constants, depending on how they're being used. You might have a module that does not have any routes as well. So let's say you have a data processing module and all it does is provide you with utilities that you can pass data into. You can do that. And it's just a very flexible structure that I found is a lot easier to use than any other ad hoc structure. So really, this is where it boils down to, is the index.js exports, the named exports, and then this recursive use of components, constants, hooks, and UI. And in some places, I've even seen nesting modules. I'm not a big fan of that. Like adding modules here, not happy about that one, but I've seen people use that. I've seen people also rename some of these, like I said, screens or pages, whatever you want to call it, you can make it work. One more other folder, I think you can pretty much add anything else to the top level or any of the subsections depending on what you're doing. So you could have a utils folder. If you're using Redux, you might find yourself being in authentication. You'd be like, okay, well, let's say I'm using Redux sagas, so you just put sagas. You would just have a sagas folder. If you're using some kind of a model based system, you might have models. If you're using TypeScript, you might want to share your TypeScript definitions. So you might have types. And again, you can have that at the top level as well. So you'd just be following this convention of Russian nesting dolls. Anytime you open a folder, it should be a Russian nesting dolls worth of these folders and files. So maybe you don't have that many constants. Maybe so you would just do constants.js and it'll be just here. It all really depends on, again, how your team wants to structure it. And this is just very flexible with the index.js, especially if you have this lower level constants, because you're like, well, authentication just needs like 2 constants. And then suddenly you're like, oh no, I need constants for every single string so that I could have different languages and stuff like that. You might just create that constants folder. And as long as you have that index.js export, you don't have to deal with changing your imports. That's pretty much it. I do want to mention testing. Co-locating tests is the way to go. So loader.spec.js, that's great. Do make sure that you name your files based off of what they're exporting. If you have a used loader hook, but it exports like 6 different hooks, you might want to have 6 different hook files, to be honest. Or you might want to have one word or like one way of like describing what you're trying to import. Maybe you will have, maybe in the index.js you would have export export hooks from /hooks, and that will like export everything, and that way you can do something like import hooks from import loader from component. Imagine that this is in a different file, and you could do something like hooks.use loader. Ooh, I do not entirely like that, but if that is the way to, if you rely heavily on hooks that are co-located with components, or however else you want to put it, in hooks that are grouped together, this is the way to do it. Let's just close out of that. Co-locating tests. I would even say, if you want to, and if you like doing just integration tests, or integration tests that aren't run by Cypress or another technology like that, but are more just like how Jest works, you're totally welcome to add tests and then integration, and then again follow this folder structure where you want to describe like what you're trying to test. Though in those cases, if you're really set on that, you might as well do it in your login page and just be like login.spec.js. That way you can have an integration test co-located with the actual page you're trying to test. So that is it, I think. I do think that this is one of the best ways of structuring React applications. There are obviously variants that, again, it's not like one thing that fits all, but starting with this structure will help you figure out what you need to change to make it fit your use case. Maybe you need more modules, maybe you need less modules, maybe you are wanting to open source some of your stuff. So instead of having the UI library in here, maybe it's going to be outside. Maybe you're going to have right next to source, you're going to have a UI, and that's where you import all of your UI, because you want to eventually, open source the library or something. Whatever works for you. Thanks for watching this video. If you have any feedback, and if there are any different ways that you're structuring your React applications, do let me know. I want to hear about it. This is a really important and interesting part of React to me, because it merges coding, but also like how people work together and how teams work together. A good folder structure makes it easier to separate the concerns of your application, but also separate people working on applications. Smaller modules are better, things like that. I will want to get into how I structure my individual React components and React hooks at some point in a future video. Hopefully I'll have that linked. If not, then I just never got around to it. But it is an interesting aspect of programming, trying to communicate to your colleagues how you want to, how you're wanting to work, and also what makes sense for your team in terms of code discoverability. And I think having a very rigid structure, well, it's not a rigid structure, but it's rigid enough that if you don't know where to put something, you just follow the simple rules of where is it being used and what is the common denominator. What folder do I need to take this out into to make it, to make it work? Like if I have a use login hook over here, that makes sense, But if I want to use it across several different pages, I'm gonna have it in this folder. Oh no! What if it's being used across modules? Then we can add it to this folder if we want to. And in the same vein, though, like what if this hook is being used here in authentication, and it needs a lot of the components and stuff that's in this folder. So if you take it out all the way, out top, it doesn't make sense. Then you can import the entire module and from a peer module. So let's say we have a I don't have a good example for this, but let's say we want to put that use user hook in here, right? Because authentication, it makes sense. It's together. I'm gonna go ahead and delete this one. Can I just delete? Yeah, okay. It requires a lot of the constants and things that are in the authentication module, but those constants and things aren't being used elsewhere, so it doesn't make sense to lift it up. So we can go ahead and just keep it there, and then when you're trying to do something like, I don't know, notes list, and let's go ahead and just breeze through this real quick. We'll have a page called, we're just going to change this to notes. And we have a page called notes list. Notes list.js, and we want to display the username. What we really want to do here is get the authentication module from here, and then we're going to export notes list. I feel like I've been trying to end this video for a while, and then I keep remembering things, but maybe this is what we want to do here. And so we will just do authentication.useUser, and we're going to add it to our exports here. Great. Export use user from hooks. And again, that's part of our public API for this authentication. And public API meaning that it's available to the peers and at the global level. This is how you would dig into it. We have a lot of files open, but where did I put it? Yeah, so you could go definitely do it like this, and then it makes sense because you know that where that module is coming from and what it's responsible for, and it doesn't necessarily make sense to make it completely global because it's very specific to authentication. Authentication could be exporting a context that's necessary for user. Authentication could be exporting or could have like I said, the constants, the hooks, the components to display user stuff correctly. Keep it in that authentication module and use it in the peer in the peer modules. That's it for the end of my spiel. This is my second ending. I guess the first one was a false ending. I hope you enjoyed this video. Do let me know what you think down below, and see you next time.